You know, it's good to look at joyous and great times with the Lord. And last week in our Doing Life series, we were at a wedding where He produced wine, and that's some uplifting stuff, isn't it? I mean, that's some encouragement. That's where the Lord comes along in the midst of your joyous moments, and He increases that joy. Doesn't He do that? He comes along sometimes like Carol and I are talking about, and our kids are all here, and they're all with us in the presence of the Lord. He increases that joy. He comes along, and He brings that to us. They're joyous moments. I loved weddings just in general. I joke with some people that I've never done a bad wedding because at every wedding, everybody's just filled with such joy that it's always good. Church service is not quite the same. And I have had some people tell me that some of my church services weren't so good. Some of you may say that today after we're done. Who knows? Because today we're going in a bit of a different direction. And it impacts our hearts a little differently. Today, we're not looking at those joyous moments, but we're looking at dark times. Just a little couple weeks ago, we had Richard Kimberly's funeral service right here. And for some of us, many of us, every time we have a funeral service here, it reminds us of others we've lost. So we sit in those moments, we remember being in this same auditorium, in the same pew maybe, perhaps even, hearing maybe a same song. And we remember those whom we've lost. Our minds trace back to those moments of terrible pain and suffering and sorrow. It's difficult to see the body of one we love lifeless. We know the truth, but seeing the house of someone who held such a high place in our heart empty is difficult. It weighs on us. That doesn't matter whether that is your parents who nurtured you when you were unable to do anything for yourself, and unable to do anything for yourself, right? Scotty's running around, we do everything for him. It just run to do it, and they aren't able to do that. And then when you are unable to do anything for them, as age squeezes, sometimes slowly, sometimes rapidly, the last breath of life from them. It's difficult. Or perhaps it is our child who we were robbed of nurturing fully by the premature sting of death. Or maybe a spouse whom we shared life with, but in death they are not there to bear its weight with us. And every moment was shared with them until then. Perhaps it's a friend, maybe who has been close, bearing our burdens, and we couldn't, and now in their greatest burden, we couldn't bear it with them. Or a sibling, a friend that sticks closer than a brother, means something because of the bonds of siblings. And maybe you and yours were close, but no matter how tight you were, you could not keep death from coming in between you. Those are dark moments. And we haven't even begun to explore and open up the possibility of guilt that we might feel in those moments. Guilt of responsibility, or guilt of how long has it been since. They're hard, they're rough, and they're difficult. And see, the question really is, in these dark moments, does Jesus bring value? when we walk through those difficult times, when we have that darkness all around of us, does Jesus bring value then? Is he only good to come in the midst of our joy and allow us to say a little bit more joy is there because of him? Or can we take Jesus with us into the dark storm clouds that are in our life? How can I do life with Jesus at a funeral? Well, I'm glad you asked. Let's look and see. In John chapter 11, I want you to know, and I tried to figure out not to do this, we got a large passage. We're going to do a lot of reading. That's just the way it's going to be. So be ready for it. And I want you to know what exactly this passage is saying. So we're going to dive into it. We're going to read and tell the story of the passage. I'm going to tell you what the passage is all about. Then we're going to jump to how we can use that and looking to see and doing life with the funeral. Jesus with the funeral. So let's start. John chapter 11, verse number 1. Now a man was sick, Lazarus, from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. Mary was the one who anointed the Lord with perfume and wiped his feet with her hair. It was her brother Lazarus who was sick. So the sister sent a message to him, Lord, the one you love is sick. One of these contrary statements come up next. I want you to hear this. When Jesus heard it, I jumped the gun. When Jesus heard it, he said, this sickness will not end in death, but it's for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. This is the contrary statement. Now, Jesus loved Martha, her sister, and Lazarus. So when he heard that he was sick, he stayed there 2 more days in the place where he was. Then after that, he said to the disciples, let us go up to Judea again. Rabbi, the disciples told him, just now the Jews tried to stone you, and you're going there again? Aren't there 12 hours in a day? Jesus answered, if anyone walks during the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks during the night, he does stumble because the light is not in him. He said this, and then he told them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm on my way to wake him up. Then the disciples said to him, Lord, if he's fallen asleep, he will get well. Jesus, however, was speaking about his death, but they thought he was speaking about natural sleep. So Jesus then told them plainly, Lazarus has died. I'm glad for you that I wasn't there, so that you may believe. But let's go to him. Then Thomas, called Twin, said to his fellow disciples, let's go too, so that we may die with him. I want you to dive in real quick. We're going to dive into that section. Great, right? Here's someone who Jesus loved. Here's a family that Jesus cared about. He's sick. They send word to him. Why did they send word to him? Because Jesus heals the sick. That's what he does. He heals the sick. And they say, hey, by the way, this guy you love, he's sick. Come on over here. Jesus says very early, this sickness will not end death, but is the glory, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. He makes this statement, and then he says that he loves them, but he waited. So he hangs around as he's there. Then he says, let's go up there now. It's time to go. And he said, let's go. His disciples are like, whoa, cool your jets. Cool your jets there, man. We don't need to be going over there. They're trying to kill you. What's the matter with you? And he says, nope, I'm going, and they don't care. I'm doing God's work. It doesn't matter. And then he told them, Lazarus is asleep. I'm going to wake him up. I love the next verse. I love just to join in there because I find myself here often, right? This would be a little sideline. I find myself here often because he says, he's sleeping. I'm going to wake him up. And the disciples say, whoa, 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 Jesus. Hang on just a minute. Messiah. Hey, you, creator of all things, you're a little missing here. If he's sleeping, that's a good thing. Let's let him sleep. Don't worry about it, Jesus. I'll help you out. Woo! Okay, we'll just move right past that. And then they said, okay, he's sleeping, it'll be okay. And Jesus has to treat them like he often has to treat us. He has to get real down low and simple. He has to say, oh, I forget. You guys are so far down there, you don't get it sometimes. Let me come down there with you. But good news, he does. And he comes down there with them and says, I want to say it plainly to you. You won't miss it. Here it is. Lazarus is dead. I'm going to go bring him back to life. Let's go. Alrighty then. So he's a little off his rocker, and I love the way they respond. Let's go die with him. It's great, isn't it? Let's go die with him. So off they go. Here's this band. That's it. That's what's happening. They've heard it. They know it. Here they go. They're going off. They think to die. Jesus has a different thought in mind, and they head the direction. And so we continue on. When Jesus arrived, when that band arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, less than 2 miles away. Many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them about their brother. As soon as Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went to meet him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Then Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been here, my brother wouldn't have died. Yet even now, I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. Your brother will rise again. Jesus told her. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection of the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe? Yes, Lord. She told him, I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world. So he has his first exchange with Martha, and she finds out he's there, and she runs. She's the go-getter, right? She gets things done. She's active. She's moving. She's not passive. She's on the way. Jesus is there. Boom. I'm going out there. And she comes out there with this statement, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. She believes in the power of Jesus, doesn't she? She knows what he's capable of. She knows that he's able to heal, and she's confident that if he had been there, Lazarus would not be dead. Is she right? She sure is. Absolutely is. She says the statement of truth. If you'd been there, he wouldn't have died. And I love even the bonus aspect, right? It's the bonus aspect that I'm going to tell you is a little difficult to even understand what's going on there. And she goes, yet even now. Is she foreshadowing here? Is she thinking, perhaps maybe in her mind, she's just got this glimmer of hope, this glimmer of possibility? I mean, what is she doing there when she goes, yet even now, I know whatever you ask, whatever you say, whatever you want, it will be done. I don't know. I want to believe that she's thinking that, but it seems not because he goes, when he says you're going to rise and tells her all the stuff, she keeps telling him, no, I know this, I know that. That's not going to be happen. And so she told him, I believe you are the Messiah. When he asked her, do you believe? I believe you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who comes into the world. He makes the statement, I am the resurrection and the life. I'm the one. Do you believe? I believe you're the Messiah. Having said this, she went back and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. As soon as Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Jesus had not yet come into the village, but was still in the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw that Mary got up quickly and went out. They followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to cry. As soon as Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and told him, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. I wonder if they talked about it. When Jesus saw her crying, the Jews had come with her crying. He was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Where have you put him? He asked. Lord, they told him, come and see. Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him? But some of them said, couldn't he who opened the blind man's eyes also have kept this man from dying? So he has his encounter with Mary. Martha runs back and goes, Mary, you got to get out there and talk to Jesus. He's here. Get out there. Go see him. Oh, fine. And so she runs off to go and see Jesus. She's out there, and everybody else sees. They says they're all coming. They think they're going to go have their big mourning party. They would do that. They'd just go and mourn. They would cry out, oh, it's awful. And they'd have their big mourning party, and that's what they think they're going to. And so they're running off. They're all with them. She's going to begin to have her mourning party, and she gets there, and she says the same thing. If you'd been here, my brother would have been alive. And Jesus sees this whole event. He sees everything that's going on. And it says he's deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. Then he asks, where's he at? And they told him, they said, come here. And he gets to the place and Jesus wept. Shortest verse in the Bible right there. Jesus wept. He's crying. And there are people that are saying, wow, look at him. He loved him so much. He loved him so much, but couldn't he have? How much did he really love him? Couldn't he have? Shouldn't he have? Why didn't he? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Remove the stone, Jesus said. Martha, the dead man's sister, told him, here they go again, Lord, there is already a stench, because he's been dead for 4 days. Jesus said to her, didn't I tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? So they removed the stone. Then Jesus raised his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you heard me. I know that you always hear me, but because of the crowd standing here, I said this so that they may believe you sent me. After he said this, he shouted with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out bound hand and foot with linen strips, with his face wrapped in the cloth. And Jesus said to them, unwrap him and let him go. Man, isn't that exciting? How are you not getting excited? Here he is, he comes up and he has his moment. He says, okay, it's time now. It's time. Remove that stone. Whoa, Messiah, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what's going on. We don't want him to stink. Imagine how Martha has to feel at that moment when she's got to go, oh, Jesus, please don't let the stench of my dying brother fill the air. Please don't do that to me. Please. Nope. I told you, Martha. Believe in me, and watch and see what happens. Watch what's going on. And then I love his exchange with the Father. I know. Let's get a little sassy with it. I like to be sassy. Oh, you're lucky there's a humming or I'd be right in your face. Some of you may not be going good. But there's a little, let's get sassy about it. I know, God. They just won't get it. They won't get it. They won't understand that I hear you. You hear me. That we're linked together. But we're going to show them. And I'm saying it just so we can show them. That's why. And then he says, Lazarus, come forth. Very specific. Because he didn't want Bob and John and Ted. He didn't want them all coming up. Sorry, Ted. He didn't want them all coming out. He says, Lazarus, you're the guy. You get out of there. You come on. Your stench-filled self gets to come on out of that grave. And he walked out. Whoa. And then Jesus says, get that man untied because they've wrapped him and let him go. That is a story. That is amazing. That should fill you with excitement. That should get your heart pumping. You should be thrilled about it. But what's the point of the story? See, the whole point of the story begins all the way back when he says that we're going to have this happen. The sickness will not end death, but is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. That's what it's about. That's what the story is telling you too. That's what the whole message is all about for you. God says, take a look and see. Lift up the glory of who God is and recognize the Son of Man. Recognize who Jesus is. See it clearly. And the whole passage is telling you, give glory to God. So are you? Are you filled with glory and awe and wonder? But see, we walk then with this Jesus, with this one that the whole passage is saying, bring glory to him. And it intersects with this moment of tragedy in our lives. It intersects with this darkness. Here's this Son of Man who should be glorified. Here's the Son of Man who should be lifted up. And it's colliding with how my heart feels because of the darkness that's surrounding me in my life. So what do I do with it? What do I do with it? What does it tell me there? How can I answer it? There are three things that you just have to know and look at this and seeing and doing life with Jesus in the middle of your darkness that you've got to grasp and get. Number one, once I get my iPad open and drink a little water, I got a little excited. Doing life with Jesus means we are filled with compassion. If we're going to do life with Jesus in the midst of dark times, our hearts better be filled with compassion. Oh, it was underneath there. Sorry. Our hearts better be filled with compassion. I want you to hear me plainly, very plainly. If you're a cold-hearted snake, you're not doing life like Jesus. I understand that some of us are just wired a little more sensitive. I cry at Disney movies. I don't know why, but I do. Some of you may have never cried in your life. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about having a heart that has compassion. We see here in the story, we see that Jesus sees them and he is greatly moved. It tells us in the very beginning that he loves them. He loves them and he is greatly moved. And we have that verse where it says that Jesus wept and we wonder, why did he weep? Why is he weeping? He comes in this conflict and he begins to weep. What do we know he's clearly not weeping for? The dead man Lazarus. How do we know that? Because he had to get down to the disciples' level and say, I'm going so that he's not dead anymore. So he knows he's not really dead. So he's not weeping for that. I want you to know I stole these from John Piper because they were so good that I said, I'm stealing all of these from John Piper. I'll just let you know I did. Possible reasons of why. One is the compassion for suffering. They had to experience suffering for the Father's glory. We hate that. In their life, sadness came upon them in a season for the glory of the Father. And Jesus looks at that suffering and he cares for them. That's one. Because of the calamity of sin is another. You see, death is a byproduct of sin. And when Jesus sees death, he understands that the reason it's there is because of sin. And so there's this calamity of sin that he's encountering fully, and he weeps over it. It could be because of the cost of redemption. He will die. Luke 12:50 lets us know he's not really looking forward to that. He's going to die, and he knows the cost of redemption. He knows the price that will be paid so that he can be the resurrection and the life. He knows it. And in this moment when he's testifying to the reality of him as the resurrection and life, he's coming to face with the cost of redemption. So he's weeping. Do you know this moment is, in a worldly perspective, this is the last one, the cause of his death is the raising of Lazarus. This is when all those people have been trying to kill him say, that's enough. If we don't do something, they're all going to turn to him. And this is what starts the ball rolling to his death. And here he sits at that moment, ready to glorify the Father, knowing what it'll bring to him. But what we can't, you can debate about why you think it is. You can say it's all rolled up in together. Sounds good to me. What we can't say is that he didn't care. He cared. He doesn't taunt us about the pain that we're receiving and say, just have a little more faith. He cares. And if he cares, so should we. How is it that we become so self-centered and self-focused that we can't see people hurting and dismiss what we don't like about them? Why is it we can't put away our own desires and be able to show a little bit of more compassion towards them in the moments of their pain? Jesus did. He cared. He loved them. And he wept for them. And if you're going to come and intersect into people's lives in their dark times, you had better have compassion. Listen, I'm going to tell you up front, and I've told you this before. Funerals sometimes give me a little bit of difficulty. Death, it's hard to see. Alicia called me and I sat in that room with them. It's hard to see because you get to see and experience the deepness of the pain. But we've got to be able to weep with them in those moments. Now, a little side note, there will always be those who question your compassion. In verse 36, look at this. Jesus is having this compassionate moment, and they turn and say, oh, see how he loved him, but couldn't he, shouldn't he, wouldn't he? In the midst of his compassion, they're calling him out for something. I want you to know when you show compassion, somebody else will call you out for something. I don't know if it's as simple as when somebody comes and you feel the tug of the Lord and the Lord stirs your heart with compassion and you give money to somebody and it turns out it's their 4th time at the church. And somebody says, oh, they're just using that in a way we shouldn't be giving on it. And they begin to challenge your compassion. I'm going to tell you when that happens, when it's me that does it to you. Jesus got the same thing. And don't let it stop your compassion. Don't let it change your heart. Don't let it remove that focus. We have to stay tender-hearted to what's happening in people's lives. Number 2. Doing life with Jesus in the middle of darkness means knowing the truth. We cannot allow the circumstance of our darkness to separate us from the reality of truth. Listen, I want you to know that's where people really need us. That's why when we're compassionate about it, we can step in with such an impact because in the middle of their darkness, they need some truth to hold on to. The darkness often exposes that what we've been grabbing a hold of just isn't going to work. It's not going to be sufficient. It's not going to be strong enough. And so in the midst of that darkness, we need some truth to grab a hold of and not let go of. And Jesus did that. Jesus understood and knew the truth. He says from the very beginning, this is going to bring glory to God. This is truth. It's going to bring glory to God. And look at the exchange with Martha and Mary in their if-thens. Was their statement wrong? Nope. It just wasn't complete. Their if-then was correct, but they didn't have the complete truth that Jesus had. They were saying something that we all go, yep, 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 but it wasn't complete. And sometimes that's what happens to us. We get caught in the incomplete truth, the half-truth, the partial truth, without grabbing a hold onto the completeness of what he's going to say. He's saying, your brother will live. And she says later, and he says, no, I am the resurrection and the life. You see, that's the truth that Jesus walked into moments with. That's the truth that he came into the darkness of the funeral with. So he walked in there and he's walking with his band, and the whole time he knows the truth. I'm the resurrection and the life. I am life. It is life. That's truth. That's down deep inside his soul and in his heart. And it doesn't matter what encounters outside. He knows I am life. Do you know we don't have, and if I'm wrong, you tell me, a recorded incident of someone dying in the presence of Jesus? You may think, as I did for a moment, the jokers on the cross. They died. They did. after Jesus. He's life. You know, every time he runs into it, he runs and intersects into death, they come back to life. It's crazy. He's life. He knows it down in his heart. He knows the reality of truth. Do you have truth to hold on to in the midst of darkness? Is it solidified in your life what the truth of God is? Can it be an anchor for you when circumstances are shaken all around you? Or have you abandoned truth, jumped on your feelings, and wonder why life feels so dark? It's truth that anchors us in. It's truth that we grab a hold of. It's truth that makes us counter every time when they just don't get it. We just don't care. Have you had a truth you believe in and somebody else doesn't? You don't care. They can try to persuade you away from it. You don't care. You know truth. I'm going to use an example. I'm going to use Dave Ramsey for just a second. Individuals who have been, I see that hand, John Roddy. Give me a little hallelujah. That's right. Okay. I'm going to use Dave Ramsey for a second. You may have different views and opinions about how Dave Ramsey does. You may have different thoughts. But you know what? People that have gone through the class and it has changed their life and it's changed the way they view their finances and it's made an impact on them, they will stand and say, this is truth. And you can tell them it's bunk and they don't care. Amen. Because they know what truth is in their life. That's Jesus here. No matter what he encountered, the truth was so instilled inside of him that he just didn't care. How versed are you in truth? We want to be a pillar in the dark moments in people's lives. We've got to be able to step in with confidence in the truth. Whether that difficulty is a funeral and death, or whether that difficulty is trials in their life. Thirdly, doing life with Jesus in the middle of darkness means experiencing the miraculous. When we're going along with Jesus in times of darkness, we get to experience the miraculous. He called a man who was dead for 4 days out of the grave. He pulled them out. Those that got to experience that with him, just, they're surrounded all by them, are those same disciples who just couldn't get it. The same disciples who tried to correct him about the need for sleep. Come on, guys, I'll take you with me, even when you don't get it. And there experienced that are Mary and Martha, who had expressed that we know if you'd been here, he would have been alive. And even now, whatever you want to take that to mean, whatever you ask, God will do. They had expressed that. They're with Jesus, and they experienced the miraculous. But do you know who else did? Those people who ran out to mourn. Those people that ran out to mourn and who just were there and just were there in the presence, and they were just doing a cultural thing, and they were just doing what they thought they should do, and they were assisting alongside. And some of them maybe even have been doing it to bring attention to themselves. I'm the best mourner here. Woo-hoo-hoo-hoo. Oh, the pain and shame. Look at me. And in the midst of that, they experienced the miraculous. Because when Jesus is invited in to do life with us in the darkness, the miraculous happens. Now, I tell you what, I'd love to tell you, it would be so awesome if I could tell you that one time I was doing a funeral, and as I was standing here in the greeting the procession, that Jesus just reached down and somebody got up off the coffin. Man, I'd love to tell you that story. They walked out. And those that were grieving rejoiced, just like what happened here with Lazarus, just like what happened when the widow intersected with Jesus and her son was raised alive, just like what happened with Jairus' daughter. I'd love to tell you that story. I don't have it. If you do, I'll sit down and you share it. And I don't mean that sassy. So what happens to us is this. we discount the miraculous. God help us. Because it doesn't get up out of the grave, we forget that he is the resurrection and the life. Whoever has the Son has life. And whoever doesn't have the Son does not have life. We forget it. You see, in those moments when I stand here and I see the sorrow and we pass by and I see the lifelessness, there's a miracle that's happened. When this person laying here has accepted the Son, he's alive. She's alive. Something miraculous has happened. God came in and took where there should be a payment for sin, where there should be a penalty of death. And by the grace, because of the work on the cross of Calvary, he comes and says, I'm going to do the miraculous. And I'm going to take you who were dead and I'm going to make you alive. And there is an eternal glory that they're allowed to be a part of because Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Now listen, if you don't have Jesus, when we do your funeral, if you're sitting here and you don't have Jesus and we do your funeral and your body is here, laying here, I will not be able to say that the miraculous has happened and what was dead has become alive. But do you know what I will say? The miraculous has still happened because there will be somebody, especially in that scenario, there will be somebody sitting out there weeping because of the sorrow of the truth. But the miraculous will happen. A loving God will come in their heart and comfort the hurting and bring grace to the weak. And that event will be used to sow the truth that Jesus is the life. The miraculous happens with Jesus. Do you see it? Have you given up on it? Have you decided it's not true? Have you said, oh, well, yeah, but sometime maybe? Or you have embraced the truth that produces the reality that when we walk with Jesus, the miraculous happens. Man, we get excited thinking about Lazarus. But there are people whose lives have been dead and been in torment and trouble, and Jesus come in and healed them in a restoration. Who was dead in their trespasses of sin, he's made new in new life. Do you know who those people are? Us. I'm one of them. You're one of them if you've accepted Jesus. You were dead in your trespasses of sin, and you now are alive. You are no longer a slave to sin. That's miraculous. You do not have to be in that bondage. You have been freed because Jesus does the miraculous. And when we walk in darkness with Jesus, he'll do the miraculous in our life. Because he's all about bringing glory to the Father. It won't happen for you. It won't happen to go, whoa, look at George. Isn't he something fantastic? It'll happen to say, look at our God. There's glory to him and to the Son of Man. So I ask you this. Do you truly believe that taking Jesus into darkness has value? Because I sure do. The problem really is, why aren't we doing it? Why aren't we doing it? Why don't we have hearts filled with compassion, head filled with a head that has the knowledge of truth, and with the awe and wonder of the miraculousness of God, and watch how he chooses to work in those moments of darkness. God, I love you and thank you for your word, and I thank you for its truth, and I pray that you make it real in our lives. Man, God, I have a fear. I have a fear that will hear this and be excited about it in church and walk out and forget about it in our homes. No, God, no, it's not right. I have a fear that I will do that. So I pray that your Spirit would do whatever it takes in my heart right now, in the hearts of anyone else sitting here, to be emboldened by the reality and moved to compassion, because there are some that don't have it, that would go beyond these walls. Do your work, Lord. It's in your name I pray. Amen.